The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Dean Roper. I am the Director of Insights at WAN-IFRA, and we are here in surprisingly sunny Frankfurt on this afternoon. And looks like we have a very global audience, a large audience as well. Looks like we have some participants from South America, North America, here in Germany, Sweden, Asia, Africa, so a well-represented audience. So glad you could all join. And today we have a featured speaker. It's Dr. Francois Nel, who has been working on our project World Press Trends for the last 2.5, 3 years. And he is a professor at the University of Lancashire in Manchester, and he does a number of other research projects, and he is a journalist at heart. And that's me. I will be guiding us through the webinar. First, a little insight to our supporters of this project. It's a massive project. And I want to start with ProTech Media, who actually sponsored the report and sponsored some of our other activities. So ProTech Media, they're a provider of publishing solutions to newsrooms all over the world, especially with its Millennium platform that features its cross-media functionality now in the cloud. So what does that mean? That means embracing all the cutting-edge trends and tech available today. So your journalists are more mobile. You can adapt those buzzwords of audience first, digital first. It features some of the new technologies of AI, smart data, and yes, print. And everything is at a reasonable price. All said, ProTech says that its solutions bring reduced implementation of costs and startup time, costs adjusted to the actual usage, and service scalable to your needs. Not to mention they are a great team. I know those guys. Check them out. Now that was a radio plug. We also have our wonderful data partners we work with throughout the year. Zenith, Chartbeat, this year Parsley and IO Technologies and Ipsos. And PwC shares some of their data with us as well. Just a quick note on one of the webinars we have coming up. So on December 11th, we have a webinar about ad trust in news media that's based on a survey and a report that's almost finished. Should be finished any day now. And we have 2 or 3 other webinars that are being planned right now, but we just don't have specific dates. But if you stay tuned to that URL there, you can stay abreast of those. So of course, today's webinar is based on the World Press Trends 2019 report that we published in the last few weeks. Hopefully, most of you have received that. And if you have not, this is the place where you can go to download the report on our website. So that's www.wan-ifra.org, WPT_report 2019. That's for WAN-IFRA members. If you're a non-member, email me and I will see if I can get you the report. But we would love your money and your support. We also have a database that you can subscribe to. Again, WAN-IFRA members have free access to that database that has tons of data about all of the research we've done for almost 30 years now. Actually, this is the 30th edition. WAN-IFRA members, of course, can go to that and access all that data for free, and then the non-members have a subscription fee. So today, Francois will talk about a number of things, but very briefly, a little bit how our industry, despite itself, actually seems to be quite resilient in many of its activities. And of course, with World Press Trends, we will look at some of the key performance indicators and trends that are driving publisher strategy. And then sort of a new angle to World Press Trends, the research that Francois and his team did around press freedom and how that's affecting many aspects of not just democracy and societies, but even the business side. So as I mentioned, Francois is a professor at the University of Central Lancashire. He also has a number of activities. He's the founding director of the Journalism Leaders Program. He holds an annual event every year. I'm waiting to attend. So before we get started and I hand it over to Francois, I just want to mention to all participants listening that you can give us your questions. And how you do that is on your right-hand side, there's a little panel there. And you can go in under questions and type in your questions and send those to me. I'll get those and try to fill those to Francois. If we run out of time, we will try to tackle those questions after the webinar. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over the screen to Francois. Francois, hold on one second if you're there. One second, sharing, here we go. Okay, Francois, are you there?
There we go. Thank you very much, Dean. I appreciate it. And hola, guten Tag, goeiemorgen to everybody around the world. Thanks so much for joining us. This is going to be a lightning overview of world press trends. You can appreciate that we draw data from a wide variety of sources, and our report and the database is rich, and hope that you will find some time to visit those. I just wanted to start off by reiterating that this year there's a lot to be optimistic about. There is no doubt that global news publishing industry is resilient. 2007, just because this is our 30th anniversary year for World Press Trends, if we just look back a little bit, you'll notice that 2007 wasn't just the start of the global economic turndown. It was also the introduction of some of the factors that have made our world of news media highly competitive. We saw the introduction of the iPhone that year and the beginning of truly the mobile revolution, and also the uptick of competition for digital ad spend with Facebook coming on board and launching their ads. Over the last 10 years or so, the global economy has grown and recovered about 3% a year. And during that period, news industry's recovery after the recession didn't quite keep pace, as you can see there. But the rate of decline, also around 3%, has slowed. And this year, we're certainly quite optimistic and think that it will stabilize. Of course, there are a number of factors that could impact on that. Not only some of the, and not least of those are some of the geopolitical ones, such as trade wars between some of the largest economies, and some smaller issues like those that we're facing here in Europe and the UK, like Brexit. But each region has dealing with some macroeconomic and regional economic issues that affect us as well. This year, we also sat down, and for those of you who've gone through World Press Trends over the many years, will know that we have traditionally reported robustly on some of the key metrics in terms of audiences and revenues. But when we were starting this year, I was challenged. David Higginson, who's the Chief Audience Officer at Reach PLC, the largest publisher right now, used to be Trinity Mirror in the UK, ended up challenging people in a blog post and in local news to say, do we really know which metrics matter? In this world that we're in, are we so focused on just looking for page views? But shouldn't we be looking at not just our outputs and our audiences, but much more at our impact? And it's with that in mind, he suggested that maybe we should justify our existence by saying, we're improving voter turnout. But that was just a provocative statement, and that got us to think about, can we find some metrics that show the contribution a free and independent press makes to our societies? And I'm excited that we're going to be able to report on those today. So what we are going to do, we're going to take a little deeper dive at audience numbers, some of the revenue trends and forecasts. We're also going to report a little bit on findings from a survey of our member associations and what they're talking about. And then lastly, we're going to take a look at press freedom and what it plays. Just in case some of you drop off before the end, or will get tired of me running through these numbers, I think it's important just to sum up some of our big numbers. And the news publishing industry remains the leading investor in journalism worldwide. And what is also clear is that the global appetite for quality news is undiminished. Paying news audiences, print and digital, have risen about just about 0.5% over the past year in this highly competitive environment. And there are now at least 640 million users paying for print and digital news every day. That is incredibly positive. We have seen circulation revenues in print decline as and advertising has come under pressure as well for print, but digital numbers continue to grow dramatically in most instances, and we've seen some of the biggest growth in paying users. So let's look a little bit more closely in terms of the general access patterns. We're seeing, this is, if we take a little bit of a long view, I think that's the very important point, is that over the last 5 years, we have seen digital share of overall or digital's audiences increase 208% over the last 5 years, and we are projecting further increases in 2020. I think that's important for us to highlight because as consumers are shifting their behaviors, and yes, some markets are competitive, but it is clear that there still is and remains a growing appetite for news around the world. It's also important for us to note that these people who are coming to us and not just reading us, but paying for our news, are also those who are generating some of the most of the page views for us. But the graphic on the right shows that in the 11 months that we analyzed from Chartbeat data up to February 2019, we also saw guest page views increase 76% over that period. And that shows that in the background to global political turmoil and all these conversations around fake news is that audiences, paying and non-paying, are turning to quality brands for news. And I think that's hugely important for us to point out this year. My apologies. This focus for us that on not just paying users, but loyal users is of course important. They are the largest sources of traffic for people. Loyal visitors are the ones that are generating. This is Chartbeat data generating some of our largest audiences. So it's not just about getting audiences, but focusing on those that are returning. I think you probably all know this, but our data this year just reminds us that it's not just digital we're talking about, but we're talking about mobile users in the main. The dominance of mobile mobile's dominance has grown every year, and we are now seeing this, particularly in places like Africa, where it is probably the 3/4 of all audiences are coming to our news sites via mobile. So I think that's just an important thing for us to remind ourselves that is unlikely to change going forward. So when we're talking about digital, increasingly we're talking about mobile. Why Google matters? In many of your areas, there's a lot of talk about policy around some of the platforms and the relationship between publishers and platforms. Those debates are incredibly important, and it's important specifically to think of and engage with Google around these issues and others, of course. But globally, Google provides 25 times the traffic for publishers that Twitter does, and more than twice what Facebook does. So actually understanding, engaging with Google and understanding more about the role they're playing in our media ecosystem has never been more important. It's important for us to engage and understand what Google does, because in many instances we don't. And this slide simply shows you, this is some Parsley data over essentially over 2008, but the last highlighted block shows you what has happened from 2017 through 2018. Essentially, and this slide is available to you in the report, but essentially this shows you that Google is, and other platforms as well, are engaging in lots of experimentation, in some instances closing products, in others opening new products, and so it's not just the fact that they are a major player in the media traffic space, but their experimentation also makes us vulnerable often. So engaging with them to understand and have some greater predictability is incredibly important going forward. Yes, just to point out, of course, Google's search is dominant, but Google News accounts for about a third of the traffic globally, according to the Parsley data. And I'm flagging that because many of you here today are probably coming to us from countries affected by the recent European directive on copyright, and there have been a lot of discussions around what Google would do and what publishers need to do in order to have access to Google News. And we're seeing people, obviously, for those of you who've been engaged with that in France, will know that that's been an issue in Spain and elsewhere. So it's not the time to discuss this in detail, but it is, I think, a really important one to highlight for you, wherever you are. Sorry. So I think the overall takeaway for us here is that there are mobile first has to be just not just a mantra, it's got to be a mission. Our content needs to be not just clicked on, but relevant, and we need to move to reliance on people. And that ultimately means, I think, a big shift for us, not just from producing content, but servicing readers. And I think there's a big debate around what that means really and how we tackle that. What comes out clearly is that there is a need for new competencies in editorial, commercial, and technical, particularly around data. And there's, of course, a risk for us in that as well, as an over-reliance on platforms. Just a couple of highlights from the revenue trends this year. I think this is an important one for us to take a look at. We've got it's happened for quite a while, but we saw that the kind of switch over in 2006 when reader revenue became the most dominant part of our income, but that continues to diverge. 66 billion dollars of global audience of newspaper revenues come from audiences. That's both print and digital. But I think it's also important to highlight that we are still earning upwards of 57 billion US dollars in advertising, and that is certainly all to play for in terms of our opportunity in advertising. In terms of where the revenues come from, yes, print still delivers the largest share of the revenues, but digital is, as we see, continues to grow and is projected to account for about 14% of total revenues in 2009, and that's up 1% over the year. So it continues its positive trend. I think this slide is just kind of important for us to keep in mind. While it's not it hasn't been easy for us, given global economic conditions and this highly competitive space that we're in and in changing consumer behavior. We have seen over the last 5 years a dramatic rise in certain metrics. Almost and digital audience revenues have climbed 189%, almost 200% over the last 5 years, while print revenues have declined by much smaller margins over that, with advertising, of course, taking the biggest knock. There is large variations by regions. We've got people here from around the world. In the report, you will see some of that, and of course, in our database, we've tried to highlight some of the highlights in regions over the year. But I think what is clear is that paying digital subscriptions have boomed in Asia Pacific over the past 5 years, and we see that climb. We expect that to continue to climb. Of course, Asia Pacific accounts for some of the world's largest media markets, including India, Japan, and China, of course. Just to point out in terms of where we stand with other media, our print, if you look at this slide, you'll see there's print newspapers and also digital newspaper revenues indicated in the pie chart at the top of that. Together, it's about 8% of total ad spend. Generally, we have seen the share of mobile internet growing the fastest, and that, just for those who are wondering whether or not we've factored in newspapers mobile advertising, no, this is mobile internet advertising excluding the income that goes to digital newspapers on mobile, for example. But that is definitely the biggest growth area year on year. This issue about advertising and the competitiveness is underlined. Dean has pointed to the ad trust survey done, and the webinar about that coming up. I'd urge you to attend that. Some really exciting metrics in that, but I just wanted to flag one of those. When people around the world were asked about their trust in advertising, in particular media contexts, so the advertising in printed newspapers and in your local newspapers were the preferred place. So yes, there might be a lot of advertising being displayed in social media and in search engine pages and in online videos and in YouTube and elsewhere. But the context in which people trust the advertising they see most is in printed newspapers, local newspapers, and even newspaper-based websites feature very highly. So I think it's a message we need to take out more strongly, and that it's not just the audiences, but the context of those in which those audiences see advertising, and ours is the preferred one. Something else we've added this year is, with this move to reader revenue, we felt it was important to just take a look, not just at prices. And you'll be familiar with, probably, with the concept of average revenue per user, or ARPU rates. Essentially, what we will be measuring is prices earned, i.e., what is the average revenue we get from, for example, a newspaper, or but not necessarily, or a digital news product, not necessarily what is the cover price charged, because you and I both know that there's one advertised price for many digital products, subscriptions and so on, but they are often highly discounted. So we wanted to take a look at that. And over the last 5 years, we took a look at what were the average revenues per user earned. That's revenues earned over the last 5 years. And what we've seen, if you look at the graphic on the left, you'll see there's been essentially quite a decline in the prices earned. As the numbers have increased, we have also lowered prices, and a lot of that is publishers trying to discount in order to get people on board, and then to keep them on board, often incentivizing them. So while we're seeing a greater appetite, there is something about how we price our products in terms of getting people, more users on board. I think what we are saying is that that rate of decline, or that price drops are slowing, so people are becoming more confident to charge than they have in many instances. But of course, this, I'd encourage you to look at our report. This varies quite significantly by region as well, in where some areas, for example, North America, print prices have not dropped. In fact, they've increased significantly. So this does vary a great deal. I think what we're seeing just in terms of revenues, just to underline that there is, we need to continue to develop revenues through trusted, indispensable mobile news and content, and probably efforts to diversify revenue streams beyond circulation and advertising. I remember Rupert Murdoch saying, when the paywall or the subscription model was introduced at the Times in London, that there's not enough advertising in the world to pay for all the online digital journalism. And I'd probably rephrase that now to say there's probably not enough money in the world from readers to pay for all the online journalism. So while I believe that there certainly will be continued growth, and the numbers show that in reader revenues, it's probably not the only place we need to look for income. Just very briefly then, a couple of points from our survey of our associations. This is the member associations of WAN-IFRA. We asked them a couple of questions, and we asked that every year. We asked them what were the greatest risks to news publishers. This is not the publishers, but the associations said business model disruption is the most popular choice with everybody, and you probably that will not come as a surprise to you. But the competition from platforms, which is why WAN-IFRA has really taken that up in their policy arm, and you'll be able to liaise with my colleagues there around some of the efforts of WAN-IFRA in looking at the policies around platforms. But I think there's something I just wanted to point out that has come up, and this is escalated in emphasis. Almost 1 in 4 of the respondents to our survey have said that attacks on journalism and independent media is a great risk to their future success. And I think that is something we need to underline and discuss a great deal more about. This is not just physical, but obviously the harm caused to people online and attacks by politicians on the reputations of the free and independent press. There's a whole lot of work to be done in that area. The opportunities for publishers, yes, it's a bit of the, you know, the best of times and the worst of times. Yes, digital is one of the issues that has unsettled our comfortable world of analog, but it's also seen by people as one of the biggest opportunities for us, and that's obviously fantastic. People are our members are saying that there is a great opportunity in the audience's appetite for trusted news, and that of course is underlined by the numbers in our report. More people are seeking out trusted news brands than ever before. And of course, the opportunity for us is to think about when they get to us that we provide them with quality journalism. There's obviously a lot of conversation about just what that means, fact-based journalism in the public interest. When we asked member associations what were they prioritizing this year and going forward, the economic question was that the innovation within newsrooms, there's a lot of work to be done there, and I know many of you who will be here today are hard at work with that, looking at innovation in their newsrooms. Just one of the things that has been on WAN-IFRA's agenda, and yours, I'm sure, is diversity, not just because inside the newsroom for political purposes, but people are recognizing the need to grow our audiences and reach out to more diverse and different audiences, and the importance of having our newsrooms better reflect our audiences. When we asked our members about that and how difficult it was for them to hire people, we saw a lot of variation. Asia and Europe, we were more likely to be able to find the talent that they were looking for, while in Africa and North America, people were saying they were struggling. So that was one of the things. When we asked how likely are people to be able to move not just into the newsrooms but up the organizations, it was interesting for me, sitting in Europe and being from Africa, to see that South America was the place where women and members of minority groups seem to face the fewest barriers to career progression. And while in Africa, people felt that that was one of the biggest hurdles they face. I think one of the most important things to note is that when we asked our member associations about whether or not they had specifically funded programs to underpin their ambitions for diversity in the newsrooms, only 31% said they had. So there's a lot of talk about diversity and the issues related to that, but there's still some room for improvement for people to put their money where their mouths are. So, of course, if we don't do that, there's a real a risk for us that the lack of diversity won't only impact on our creativity, but also our financial bottom line. I'm just going to go quickly to our last point, and this is, I think, really important for us to pause on. When we started with press trends 3 decades ago, the idea that the Berlin Wall had come down, and as many of you have been aware of the celebrations recently, and we felt that the democracies across the world was almost unstoppable. We recognize now that that is indeed not the case. We also sadly note that Reporters Sans Frontières and other people who've been monitoring press freedom have noted that press freedom is in decline in many parts of the world, including some of the advanced democracies. And for that reason, we wanted to take a look at, is there a relationship between the extent to which a country has a free and independent press and some of the other indicators in societies. Now, this is just to let you know the beginning of some work we're doing in that area. And yes, of course, correlations themselves are not, don't suggest causation, but this multivariate analysis, when there's one correlation, that's interesting, but when if these are repeated across different data sets from different places with such high statistical significance, it's important for us to know. When we did our analysis, we noted that the freer the press, the higher the electoral integrity, the higher the rule of law, the higher the political stability and the absence of terrorism in countries. The higher the control of corruption. And the only place where it was lower is that the higher the press freedom, the lower the invalid votes. So where there is free and independent press, people are less likely, and those, including those who are forced to vote, are less likely to spoil their votes. I think that when we also just delved into our very rich database of World Bank and other data that we're using, OECD, UNDP, and others, we also discovered that there's the freer the press, the higher the general human development index, and you'll find the full definitions of these in our report, but also some of the other social indicators that we all care about. Gender equality, the extent to which women are educated, in which the extent to which they are present in our political system, is significantly related to the extent to which press are free to operate. I think this one was very exciting to me and actually surprising, because I had hoped to find these kinds of relationships, but it was stronger than I ever thought. If your government, if your country is looking to attract greater foreign direct investment, the odds of you succeeding if you do not have a free and independent press declines dramatically. And yes, we have seen some countries where people are investing in over the short term, and there are some unicorns in that space. But over the globe, the higher the press freedom, the higher the direct foreign investment, the higher the trade across borders, the higher the GDP per capita, the higher the gross national income, and the ease of doing business. The only thing that is lower in terms of the economy is poverty. The lower the percentage of poverty in a country. So I hope that you'll take that great courage and great heart from that, to note that yes, we are important to democracies, but we play a very important role in lubricating the wheels of society and improving the lives of people and our economies. And we will, of course, this underlines how important it is for the press to use their power to contribute to democracy by ensuring that our communities are more united, not more divided, and that we don't use this opportunity to polarize societies and increase distrust from readers and other role players. So overall snapshot, yep, the digital numbers are all up and continue to grow. Yes, there are some challenges in terms of some of the print areas, but as we see changes in consumer behavior, but that is an inevitable change of audiences, but the audiences are coming to us, and our challenge going forward is an economic one, and across the globe we've seen people valiantly innovating and working hard to do that. So there's a lot to be encouraged about. Thank you very much, Dean.
Okay, thank you, Francois. Always informative, a lot to for all of us to digest and to think about. We have time for a couple of questions that came up, and Francois, it's up to you. What if you want? I see a couple other questions here. So one general question is about the global trust. Global ad trust. I'll tackle that. The question is, this person asked that those figures seem really high in terms of the ad trust in printed newspapers and newspapers in general. So what I would say about that is that I can understand that sentiment. So in our survey, it is quite varied from especially continent to continent. So for example, here in Europe, if you look at the figures we got from, say, Norway and Sweden, in those two countries, ad trust was very low, whereas like in Spain, it was quite high, and that varies in many parts of the world. But that figure that we showed today was kind of an index, a global figure. And that's one thing to mention also about World Press Trends, and that's why it's called World Press Trends, is if you look at a lot of our revenue figures, circulation figures, of course, a number of those are influenced by, say, for example, in print, where you have massive circulations in India, in Japan, and other places. That tends to have a huge impact on those figures, and on the other end, for digital. So I mean that is sort of sums up the global nature of what we do. And regarding the ad trust report, that will be ready, as I mentioned, hopefully in a couple of weeks, and that goes very granular into country by country trust, continent by continent, and other metrics about age, gender, and that sort of thing. Were you going to say something, Francois?
Just to underline that, if I may, Dean, last year, World Press Trends, we also did an analysis of the relationship between trust and performance. And my research partner, Carl Milburn, and I were really puzzled around that, because we used as our trust indicator the Edelman Trust Index numbers that many of you are familiar with. And there are 28 countries represented in their sample, as I recall. And what we did see, because we overlaid education data and digital penetration data and all sorts of things around that, we did actually see that education levels in countries affect trust. And going back to the point that Dean was making, where some of the Scandinavian countries are more skeptical. If we had a rule of thumb, although there are obviously some anomalies like that, it was definitely that the more educated the country is overall, the more skeptical they are. Therefore, i.e., the lower they are likely to trust anything. Whereas the lower the education levels, people are more trusting, and I think that poses also a huge responsibility on the media, and a challenge for media in highly educated environments to earn the trust of educated and wide-eyed readers, and those in less developed areas to be worthy of the trust they have.
Okay, we have one other question. One of the charts referred to loyal readers and returning ones. What's the difference?
That's a methodological one. I just need to quickly take a look at that. But I'll quickly go back. That had to do with a specific definition of the amount of times they come back, and it's in the apologies. I don't have it right. Oh, there it is. A loyal user. A loyal user there is the one that is. This slide will come up again. Apologies for that. A loyal user returned to the site at least 6 times in the last 16 days, and returning visitors returned more than once in the past 30 days. So it's basically yeah. I hope that satisfies that. New visitors are on the site for the first time in 30 days. So loyal ones come to the site at least 8 times in the last 16 days, 2 weeks. Returning visitors at least once in the last month, and new visitors have not been there more than once that month.
Okay, good. Well, I think that's a good stopping point. Francois, thank you so much, as usual. Very informative. And to everybody attending, thank you for listening in. We will send everybody that signed up a summary of today's webinar. And the webinar is being recorded and will be posted to our YouTube channel, just in case you'd like to see it again or share it with a colleague. And again, if you would like to find out more about the World Press Trends report, you could go to that URL I had earlier, or you can send me an email. My email address is Dean, D-E-A-N Roper, R-O-P-E-R, at WAN-IFRA.org. And sorry,
Dean, if I can just add one request from that. As we think about the next World Press Trends, we certainly welcome any of you to send us questions that we might tackle in future reports. So please don't hesitate to give us feedback about the kinds of questions, the kinds of answers you're looking for.
Great. So one last plug again, on December 11th, we will have the webinar on ad trust. And again, we'll probably have 1 or 2 other webinars before the end of the year. So thanks for attending, and have a great day wherever you are. All the best. Bye.
Thank you.